It was the spring of 2023. I was living in Austin, Texas at the time, and everything was boring. Everything felt boring to me. My workouts felt boring. My day-to-day life kind of felt boring. I had reached a point where I pretty much knew what I wanted to do and how to do it. I'd watch enough educational stuff on YouTube, and that's how I would always spend a lot of my free time in the evenings or when I was, eating lunch or breakfast or something like that. I just pull up a video and learn something. But I got to a point where I realized I didn't need to keep learning something. I knew what I needed to know, and that was a matter of execution. So it left this void and this feeling of well, now what? And to fill that, I discovered the running side of YouTube. And in doing so, it has completely changed my life. At the time, I had a lot going on, and I knew I was getting ready to leave Austin, moving on from current situations, relationships, and whatever. And I knew that wasn't really going to suit me and get me where I want to go. It just wasn't making me happy at the end of the day, and it was for the better. So logically, when something like that's going on, you've got things going on in your head, and you're not really sure how to express them, especially as a guy these days. You buy a pair of running shoes, and that's going to solve all your problems. And that first pair of running shoes, I remember I bought them on Amazon, and to this day, I remember the blisters and the pain that they ultimately caused me in the next couple of weeks. But little did I know that pair of running shoes was going to completely change the trajectory of my life in multiple dimensions. So here's the story. First things first, I signed up for a race. I had pretty much run maybe 3 to 4 miles max as my longest distance, and I signed up for an ultramarathon. Not a marathon, not a half, not a 10K, not a 5K. I signed up for an ultramarathon. It was a 50K, which is over 30 miles, which in doing so, it quickly sprung me into a completely new training style and phase of my life. I now finally had something that I was working towards in the physical department that was different. I had always been the type of person to, I want to lift weights. And I would always lift weights at least 4 days a week. It was actually more like 5 or 6 for a large part of my late teen and early 20 years. But I never had something that I was working towards as a goal necessarily. I had a idealized physique, but I never had a tangible goal. It was kind of I want to get better. I want to build more muscle. I want to look leaner, etc. But I never had a show or a competition that I was aiming for because I knew what it took to go those routes was not something that I wanted to do. So before I even ran 10 miles, I had a 30-plus mile ultramarathon in the distance, and that was set for, I believe, the first weekend of November. Keep in mind, we're approaching the summer, and in Austin, Texas, this is the hottest time of the year. So you can't really escape the heat and humidity. Obviously, you can run in the morning, but you're not going to be able to escape that humidity, and temperatures at times wouldn't get much below 80 degrees. So no matter what, it's going to be hot. But those early stages of training, the blisters, the changing of running shoes, and the consistency and the discipline that I was building was something that I really didn't realize how it would trickle into other aspects of my life. I began to take so many other things much more seriously, from my nutrition, from my supplementation, to my sleep, obviously my training. I had a 4-day-a-week lifting split and 3 days a week where I was running. And even that probably wasn't enough, but I started there because I had been someone who really hadn't been running at all. I started to look for those little benefits and those little nudges in the right direction wherever I could, and especially in my diet, because that ultimately is what would fuel me and get me ready for the next workout, which I knew was less than 24 hours away once I finished the last one. Which is why when Magic Mind reached out to send some bottles over, I had to say yes. Just this little shot packs in a ton of ingredients meant to enhance your mental performance without overpromising. With over 200 studies, third-party testing, and even Magic Mind sleep for 24 hours of performance, Magic Mind is the ultimate boost and nudge in the right direction that I was looking for. I've been taking it well over a week now every single day, and I just took a shot about an hour before filming this video, and I have to say, I'm much more in the zone, and I don't even know where my phone is because I haven't looked to grab it. I've been liking the taste of the sleep performance shot more than the mental performance shot, but to be honest, my sleep's been great anyway, so I can't really comment on how much this one works versus this one. In terms of taste, you could put this over some ice, you can put the sparkling water if you really wanted to, but I just ripped the shot because I think it tastes pretty good, and the shot's way easier to take down, and then I'm good to go. But right now, for the first time, the 24-hour pack, the sleep and the mental performance shots are being bundled for 45% off with the exclusive link That is the first link in the video description box. There's no better time to start than now. Make 2025 the year you start building your mental resilience. Improve both your sleep and awake clarity with Magic Mind. So all is going well, and all I think is going well until we get to about June of 2023, a few months out from the race. That's when I developed some knee pain, and I didn't really know what to expect, so I stopped running for a couple of days, and I was like, okay, we'll get back into it. Then as I would start running again, boom, right back. So I had a period of time in the summer where I pretty much stopped running. I would go for some walks, but my knee would hurt. And I eventually had to go to physical therapy in August. And I went to physical therapy from the end of the summer into the early fall just to get myself back into the rhythm so where I could start running again. I had to fix my form and ultimately ease back into things so that I wouldn't cause an overuse injury yet again. I start to do so, and while I'm not running as much as I would like to, I feel like I'm getting back to a pretty good level of fitness, and my fitness is coming back. But about 5 days out from the race, I get COVID. I definitely didn't want to overdo it and overtrain during that period, so I pretty much stopped all lifting and running 5 days into the race. And the day before the race, I ran for about a mile and a half on a treadmill, and then was like, well, we're going to have to see what happens. At the time, that first 50K was the hardest thing I had ever done. And at one point, I almost started crying during the race because I didn't know how to express the emotions of I had trained so long for this. It'd been building up. And then now I'm finally doing it. And while yes, it hurts. Yes, it sucks. I'm gonna finish this thing. It was such a weird experience, but I crossed that finish line and I didn't really know what to think. Next couple of days, I couldn't really walk, but for whatever reason, as much as it was terrible and it sucked, I was itching to sign up for something else. About a month later, I packed up all my stuff, left Austin, Texas, still paying rent on that apartment for the next 6 months, but you got to do what you got to do sometimes. Drove across to Georgia, spent the holidays with family, and had some time to really kind of figure out what I wanted to do. And I wasn't running as much, but I was still lifting like I usually do. And I kind of got into this rhythm once we got into January, it's go time. We want to do something else. But I was able to convince my sister, who currently is in college, to run an ultramarathon with me because she was supposed to run the first one with me, but she had an injury. She had a hip issue, and so she had to pull out. So I figured, well, let's use this as an excuse to go run somewhere cool, because the race that I ran in Austin, it was about a 10-mile loop that you had to do about 3 times. And while that's, hey, there's cool places to run in Austin, don't get me wrong, it was monotonous and it wasn't super beautiful in terms of views. So I signed up for round 2. It's a 50K out in Superior, Arizona, which is just outside of Phoenix. And when I tell you this was the most beautiful place I had been up until this point, I'm not kidding. It was amazing. I'm an East Coast guy. Lived up in the Northeast, lived down in the Southeast a little bit for a short period of time, lived in Austin, which is kind of I don't know what you want to call Austin, Texas, I had not been, out west very much. And so Arizona, the landscape, the desert climate, the desert mountainous rocky climate, beautiful, beautiful trails. I mean, this was an absolutely beautiful race. And we took our time. I was like, hey, we're going to just take however long it takes. I'm going to get to the finish line and we're going to enjoy it. We may have gotten lost, may have had an extra couple of miles, but we got to the finish line. And while, yes, it hurt, I at least had the experience a few months back of running a 50K. So running a second 50K, while this one was a bit more challenging, it was a little bit longer and it had a little more elevation, my body was able to handle it a lot better. And I was back to jogging just a couple days later. We spent a couple days exploring Phoenix. We hit up Sedona, went to Flagstaff for a day. But at this point in time, I had the bug. And for whatever reason, running was really just exciting me. I was excited to do things. I was excited to use it as an excuse to explore places. Whenever I would travel, whenever I'd be somewhere, I'd go for a run, check out the area, whether I was in Detroit, whether I was in Texas, whether I was in Florida, doesn't matter. Montana. I mean, I use this as an excuse to just go run and explore a place because now I could cover so much more ground while I'm running on foot that I couldn't cover when I was walking. And it's just an amazing way to see new things and to see new places. But the dust started to settle from the race in Arizona, which was in February of 2024. And as I got back into the grind, the regular routine, back into my normal work schedule, I thought, I'm missing something. I'm missing that feeling of discipline, that training that comes with, oh, I have a goal. I have this. I have a challenge. I don't know if I can do it, but I do know I can do X, Y, Z today, tomorrow, the next day to get closer to doing that thing or to get myself in a position to do that thing. And so at this point in time, I signed up for Cruel Jewel 50, which is about a 57-mile, end up being 60-mile race in the mountains or hills of North Georgia. Now, for those who are not familiar with the area, it is a lot more hilly than you think. It's just like Appalachian Trail terrain. And while the mountains or the hills don't really exceed much past 4,000 feet, there's quite a bit of up and down, up and down, up and down. It's not like huge mountains, but the elevation gain definitely adds up. And I signed up for this Cruel Jewel 50, not really knowing much about it. But as I read on Reddit and I read some stuff, I quickly realized that this was not a joke. Over 14,000 feet of elevation gain. I didn't really know how to comprehend that because the past race I did was around 3,000 feet, maybe 4,000 feet max, over 30 miles. And I'd have to nearly double the distance that I covered on those past 50Ks and 3 to 4x the elevation as well, which I didn't really know how to train for that because I just never did it. But in this span of time between mid-March when I began the training for this and early May when the race began, this was probably the most disciplined I had ever been in terms of my diet. My diet completely changed. Like, I had been pretty good. I had always been, protein, this, that, carbs, whatever, eating pretty good, mostly whole foods. But I flipped a switch and I was like, if we're going to train for this and we're going to ask our body to go through something that's pretty taxing, to say the least, we need to be feeding it properly, and everything that I consume needs to have a point. I'm going to eat something because my body craves it, and my body's going to utilize that nutrition to either heal or prepare or fuel the next workout or the next run because I'm going to ask it to do something that I've never asked it to do before. This did lead to me getting into making my own sourdough bread. It led to me getting into, raw dairy, raw milk. It led to me going to now my local farmer's farm store to get a lot of my eggs and a lot of the foods that I normally consume, because a lot of the stuff that you get in the grocery stores is either highly processed or there's added ingredients. And I was like, I just want to get it from the source. And I have never felt better in doing so. And that has not changed. I'm still that way. And it's actually only progressed, and I've taken it to new heights over the past couple of months. But I started to see other aspects of my life change. I was seeing, I was seeing the hard work and the discipline pay off, not only in my physical body and training and capabilities, but in my day-to-day work, in my trading-related stuff. Because actually, the month of May, when I had the race, was my best month of 2024, performance-wise. I had done the best, and I traded the least. But it's funny how that kind of works. And I started to see that paying off in other aspects and being able to make a little bit more money here and working on this side project here that was starting to, actually see some rewards, right? I was able to see some of the fruits of my labor in other aspects. And it was really interesting how focusing in and seeing that discipline in one area translate to other areas of my life. It was also around this time where I started reading a book, which is on the shelf behind me. And I had this very substantial psychology shift. And I essentially realized that I could pretty much do anything that I really wanted to do as long as I intentionally approached it without giving it this excess meaning, without making it out to be much more than it really is. And I boiled down this race to, it's just 57.5 miles in the woods, and you just keep moving. You run when you can, and you just walk, and you hike, and you grind it out. And you eat as much as you can, you drink as much as you can, and you just do it. And about 19 hours later from the beginning, I crossed the finish line. I think I actually finished top half in the race for the 50 mile. And at around 3 a.m., I crossed the finish line, went home, took a shower, and tried to sleep, but I couldn't sleep. And rehabbed and recovered over the next couple of days to get back to walking semi-normally. But I realized that I could do hard shit if I want to do that. And it wasn't about doing it because it was hard and that it should be terrible and tough and it's going to make you better. No, it's like I wanted to see if I could do it. I wanted to test the limits, and I really like being outside. And I was like, this is a cool way to not only do that, but also explore an area that I've never really been. The coming months after that, I pretty much just continued to maintain that level of discipline. And while I didn't really have a race planned yet, I had my eyes on something that I thought could be even more awesome. not only did I want to do it for myself, but I wanted to bring along my sister and then my dad, who also had the chance to run and test the limits of what they could do in a completely new way. So I soon signed up for my 4th ultramarathon, and this would be 11 months since running the first one in October of 2024 out on the outskirts of Death Valley, California. The race began in Lone Pine. It ran up to the base of Mount Whitney and then back through the Alabama hills in this hot desert climate. Over 90 degrees was a high temperature on the day. And I ran a 50 mile, my sister ran a 50K, and my dad ran a marathon. And it was all trail-based, lots of elevation gain, and very tricky conditions with the sandy nature of the trails. And this is the race that unlocked something that I didn't know existed. Yes, I had to develop discipline for the other races, and yes, I was training and it was having fun and I was enjoying it, and I was like exploring a whole other aspect of interests that I never knew I had. This race, I had to do something that I legitimately didn't think was possible, but I somehow did it. And so I ran the first half with my sister, and our paths kind of drifted off as she was finishing up her 50K. She ran back to the finish or the start line, and I had to go out for pretty much the second half of my race. And as I realized that I wasn't going to make the cutoff. It was a weird way that this race was, where usually the longer the distance, like the more favorable the time or the average pace is for the cutoff. But the way that they kind of structured this was the 50K and the 50 miles started at the same time in the morning, and the end of the race was pretty much by sundown or around when the sun set, 7 p.m. or something along those lines, once it was like getting to be dark. And I guess the intention was we don't want people out on the trails after dark, so we'll set the cutoff to be 7 p.m. And in doing so, it would require about a 16-minute per mile pace for the entirety. And that's going to count all of your stops, your hiking, because it was a lot of hills and sandy hills and hiking. It's also 90-plus degrees out, so that's going to slow you down substantially as well. And so I had never done that. I had run 50Ks in the past, and I had never run 50 miles at a pace of that level. The Cruel Jewel race, I think I finished somewhere in the 19 minutes per mile average by the end of it all, with extreme amounts of climbing, thunderstorms, literally rivers forming on the trails, going into the night, which I've never done. I didn't really know how I'd be able to do it or how easy that would be. I think on paper, I thought I could do it a lot easier than it really was, but it turned out to be a lot more challenging. And I got to about mile 45, and I realized that I had about an hour to go until the cutoff. And at the pace that I was running, I was going to get maybe 3.5 miles per hour. I was moving at a pace of 3.5 miles per hour. And for anyone who is in the ultra space, like, that's not necessarily slow on these larger events. Obviously, with the elites out there, yes. But for the average person, or for the average middle-of-the-pack person who runs these things, that's not slow. You're moving at a pace, and deeper into a race, it's 100 degrees out, essentially. Like, yeah, it's not terrible. It could be worse. You could be stopping. You could be, on the side of a trail, twitching out because you don't have enough sodium or you're dehydrated, right? Like, that's what happens all the time. And so I realized that I need to move at a pace north of 5 miles per hour to finish this thing under the cutoff, which is pretty fast for that point in the race. And I had never done that. Never. The Cruel Jewel race, I was walking pretty much the back half of that race. Once I hit mile 35, there was almost no more running. I ran the last bit into the finish line, but that was it because I knew I was done. This race out in California, I knew I now had to run. Every part of my body hurt, was aching. I couldn't eat anymore. I just couldn't eat. My stomach, I just was not going down. Anything I tried to eat was like dry, and it was like I was going to throw up. I was nauseous. I was trying to drink as much as I could, but even that was getting tough at this point in the race. But I knew I had to get to that finish line because I could not possibly fathom the idea of crossing the finish line, but crossing it after the cutoff and not having this race like count, technically. I wanted to finish it before it was supposed to be finished. And there were not very many people who did this 50-mile race, and probably for good reason, because it's not a joke. But some way, somehow, I hit the last aid station. I took a shot of Coke, which I never drink Coke. If you know me, I don't drink soda anymore. I don't drink Coke. I used to drink a lot of diet soda. I stopped completely. Haven't done that in months, many months, maybe almost a year now. And I drank a full sugar Coke. Just a cup like this big, a small little cup, like a little kitty cup. And somehow I shot down that Coke and ran the rest of the way to the finish line, logging a couple of miles through treacherous trails. I mean, these are rocky trails, up and down, hills, this and that. And I ran those last couple miles, a few of them at a sub 10-minute pace, finishing with actually, I think, 7 minutes to spare before the cutoff. I don't really remember. I remember it, but I also don't remember or really understand how I was able to get my body to move at that speed on those trails without substantially injuring myself based on how much pain that I was currently in. And after that, it took me a long time to recover from that race. I tried to start running again like 2 weeks later, and my knees I had issues with my legs. So this one, I did cause some more damage, and not surprisingly, because I had to push my body beyond limits that I thought were humanly possible for me at the time. And so, long story short, we finish the race, we make the cutoff, and we complete 4 ultramarathons in 11 months. When go back, a year or two, I guess, from when I'm filming the video now, 2 years ago, running, like we run. I don't run. I realize that ultras are really cool, especially if you find the right ones. They can be as fun or as boring as you want them to be. And I like to say now it's my excuse to go somewhere new. Now when I think about running an ultra or running a race, I don't think about, I want to test my limits necessarily. I think about, I want to go to Colorado. I want to go Arizona. I want to go to Utah. And I want to run in a place, that I've never been or that I think would be really cool to experience and see from a different perspective. And that's what you get to see when you're running these races. But at the same time, your mind is what limits you. Now that I know what I could do at the end of a 50-plus mile race, I think completely differently about what's possible and about what pain really is. I clicked into a gear that I've never clicked into, and that's pretty cool. And I wouldn't have discovered that had I not started running. In terms of future races, I will continue to enter the Leadville 100 lottery. I think it's like one of the most classic or well-known 100-mile races, very tough as well in the U.S. I'm going to continue to enter that lottery every single year, and hopefully one year we get it. Well, eventually one year we'll get it, and we'll see what we can do. But in the meantime, I'm not like trying to do races just to kill myself. I'm taking a much more sustainable and healthy approach, because these things do beat you down. So not doing 4 ultramarathons in a year, at least that's not the plan, but you never know what happens this year. I guess because I didn't know I was going to run 3 or 4 or even 1 2 years back. Definitely a different type of video, but I thought it was worthwhile sharing. Hope it was helpful. And thanks again to Magic Mind for sponsoring today's video. I will leave Magic Mind and that 45% off discount code as the first link in the video description box. Peace.